In the heart of the lush and untamed valley of Kambala, there was a village known as Zaraka. This village was famous for two things: its fierce warriors and the most beautiful woman ever born in its history. Her name was Adana. Adana was not only beautiful but also strong, fearless, and unmatched in combat. Her father, Chief Ogundu, was the greatest warrior of his time, and he had trained his daughter from childhood to fight as fiercely as any man. She wielded a spear like a hunter chasing prey, and her fists were like stones pounding yams. She was swift, deadly, and unyielding. As she grew older, men from every corner of the land sought her hand in marriage. Princes, hunters, warriors, and even rich traders, all came to Zaraka hoping to claim Adana as their wife. However, Adana had no interest in marriage. She valued strength above all and refused to be won like some prize. So, she made a bold declaration. "Any man who wishes to marry me must first defeat me in combat." Her words spread like wildfire, and soon, men lined up at the village square, eager to prove themselves. The first challenger was a well-built warrior named Juba. He was confident in his skills and believed that no woman could defeat him. The entire village gathered around the fighting ground as Adana stepped forward. She was dressed in a simple warrior's cloth, her hair tied back, her spear at her side. Juba charged at her, swinging his club. Adana dodged, her movements faster than a shadow. With a swift kick to his chest, she sent him sprawling in the dirt. The crowd gasped. Before he could rise, she placed her foot on his chest and pointed her spear at his throat. "Yield," she commanded. Shamefaced, Juba surrendered. The crowd cheered, and the other men looked at each other in disbelief. One by one, suitors came forward. One by one, Adana defeated them all. A hunter named Kwame tried to surprise her with a net, but she tore through it and knocked him unconscious. A prince from a distant land tried to use his speed against her, but she caught him mid-dash and flipped him over her shoulder. A rich trader even tried to bribe her with gold, but she only laughed and told him to leave before she broke his nose. Days turned to weeks, and weeks into months, yet no man could best her. But still, they came. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, an outsider entered the village. He was tall, lean, and carried a simple wooden staff. His name was Tund, a wandering warrior with no home, only stories of battles won and enemies vanquished. He watched as another man fell to Adana's skill. As the defeated suitor limped away, Tund stepped forward. "I wish to fight," he said. The crowd murmured. They had seen many men fall, but something about this one felt different. Adana studied him. He was calm, his eyes sharp, and there was no arrogance in his stance. "Very well," she said. The fight began. Tund was fast, and for the first time, Adana found herself pushed to the limit. He dodged her strikes, countered her attacks, and forced her to rethink every move. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Then, with a sudden twist, he disarmed her. Her spear fell to the ground. The crowd gasped. But before he could claim victory, Adana spun and swept his legs from under him. He crashed down, and in a flash, she was on top of him, pinning him to the ground. "Yield," she whispered. Tund looked up at her, breathing hard. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. "I yield," he said. The crowd roared, not because Tund had lost, but because for the first time, Adana had met a worthy opponent. She stood up and helped him to his feet. "You fight well," she admitted. "And you fight like the wind," he replied. The two stared at each other for a long moment. And for the first time in her life, Adana felt something she had never felt before. But the story is not over yet. Adana stepped back, her heart pounding, not from exhaustion, but from something unfamiliar. Tund was different. He had not fought her out of arrogance or the desire to possess her like a prize. He had fought because he respected her strength. The village was silent, waiting for Adana to make her decision. Would she accept Tund as her equal? Would she finally choose a husband? But Adana did something no one expected. She turned to the gathered crowd and declared, "This fight was the closest I have ever come to defeat. But I was not defeated. And as long as I remain undefeated, I shall not marry." A murmur spread through the village. The men who had hoped for her hand sighed in disappointment. Some called her stubborn, while others admired her resolve. Tund, however, only smiled. He dusted himself off and bowed his head. "Then I will return," he said. "Not to claim you, but to challenge you again. Until the day I defeat you, or die trying." Adana's lips curved slightly. "Then you are welcome in Zaraka anytime, Tund." And with that, Tund left the village, disappearing into the horizon. A new challenge. Months passed, and still, men continued to come for Adana's hand. Some had heard of Tund's battle and believed they could succeed where he had failed. But none could best her. She fought each one, sending them away bruised and humbled. Then, one evening, just as the sun was setting behind the mountains, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the. Tund had returned. The village erupted in excitement. The first man to truly challenge Adana had come back. This time, he carried no weapon, only his bare hands and a determined smile. Adana, standing tall in the village square, met his gaze. She had been waiting for this. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I have never been more ready," Tund replied. The fight began again. This time, Tund fought smarter. He had studied Adana's style, learned her strengths, and found her weaknesses. Their battle was a storm of fists, kicks, and counters. Dust rose around them as they moved like shadows, striking, blocking, dodging. The village held its breath. Blow after blow, neither gave in. But then, with a sudden twist, Tund caught Adana's wrist and swept her legs from under her. She hit the ground hard, and before she could rise, Tund pinned her down, just as she had done to him before. "Yield," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Adana stared up at him, chest rising and falling. The entire village waited. Would she fight back? Would she refuse? Then, for the first time in her life, she smiled. "I yield," she said. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Adana and Tund only looked at each other. It was not about winning or losing. It was about respect. About finding someone who could truly match her. Tund stood and offered her his hand. She took it. "So," he said, "what now?" Adana smirked. "Now, we train. Because next time, I won't L." Laughter rippled through the village as the people celebrated. Adana had finally met her equal, not just a husband, but a partner, a rival, and a warrior who would stand beside her, not above her. That night, the village of Zaraka celebrated as never before. Drums pounded, fires blazed, and the people danced beneath the open sky. Adana and Tund sat side by side, watching the festivities unfold. "You are the first to ever defeat me," Adana admitted, sipping from a wooden cup of palm wine. Tund smirked. "And yet, you do not seem upset." "Because I know I will defeat you next time," she said, a playful glint in her eyes. Tund chuckled. "Then I suppose I must train harder." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the flickering flames of the bonfire. The air between them was charged with something unspoken, something deeper than words. Then, Adana turned to him. "Do you truly wish to marry me, or do you simply wish to fight me forever?" Tund met her gaze, his expression serious. "Why not both?" Adana blinked, surprised. Most men had wanted her because of her beauty, her status, or the challenge she presented. But Tund wanted her for what she truly was, a warrior. "If I am to marry," she said slowly, "it will not be as a wife who serves. It will be as an equal. We will fight together, hunt together, and rule together. I will not be tamed." Tund grinned. "I would never ask you to be anything less than yourself." She studied him for a long time. Then, for the first time in her life, she reached out and took his hand. "Then we will make a pact," she declared. "We shall marry, but our union will be forged in strength. We will train each other, challenge each other, and fight side by side. If ever one of us grows weak, the other must make them strong again. Do you accept this?" Tund's fingers tightened around hers. "I accept." And so, under the light of the full moon, Adana and Tund sealed their pact, not just as husband and wife, but as warriors bound by honor, strength, and love. The trials ahead. Their marriage was unlike any other. There was no grand wedding, no submission, no traditional roles. Instead, they proved themselves to each other every day. They sparred at dawn, hunted in the afternoon, and debated strategy by firelight. Together, they became legends. When neighboring tribes threatened Zaraka, it was Adana and Tund who led the warriors into battle, fighting side by side like a storm sweeping through the battlefield. When famine struck, they ventured into the wildlands, hunting beasts others feared to face. But their greatest test had yet to come. One night, a messenger arrived from the farthest reaches of the land. He was bloodied, exhausted, and trembling with fear. "A warlord is coming," he gasped. "A man named Okai the Conqueror. He has already destroyed 3 villages. He takes what he wants: gold, land, and women. He has heard of Adana's. He means to claim her as his prize." Silence fell over the village. The people turned to Adana. But she did not flinch. "Let him come," she said coldly. "He will learn, as all others have, that I am no man's prize." Tund stepped beside her, his hand resting on his sword. "And he will learn that to face you is to face me as well." The battle for Zaraka had begun. And this time, it was not just Adana's freedom at stake, it was the fate of their entire people. The news of Okai the Conqueror's approach spread like wildfire. Fear gripped the hearts of the villagers, for they had heard of his brutality. He was a warlord who burned entire settlements to the ground, taking whatever and whomever he pleased. His army was vast, his warriors ruthless. But Adana and Tund were not afraid. They stood before the village council, weapons in hand, as Chief Ogunda spoke. "Okai is not like the men you have defeated before, my daughter. He comes with an army. He does not fight for honor, he fights to destroy." Adana's jaw tightened. "Then we will teach him what it means to fight against true warriors." Tund stepped forward. "We must prepare. We will not let Zaraka fall." The villagers rallied behind them. Men and women alike took up arms, training through the night. Traps were set along the roads leading to the village, warriors hidden in the trees, their bows ready. Spears were sharpened, and shields reinforced. Then, one morning, the earth trembled beneath. Okai had arrived. The battle for Zaraka. From the top of the village wall, Adana and Tund saw them, hundreds of warriors, their armor glinting in the sun. Okai himself sat atop a massive black horse, his face hidden behind a fearsome metal mask. His voice was deep, powerful. "Zaraka," he called. "I have heard of the woman who thinks she is stronger than men. I have come to claim her. Send her to me, and I will spare your village. Resist, and I will burn it to the ground." The villagers murmured in fear, but Adana stepped forward. She climbed to the top of the village gate, lifting her spear high. "If you wish to take me, Okai," she shouted, "then come and take me yourself. Or are you afraid to face a woman in battle?" A murmur spread through Okai's men. The warlord growled, dismounting his horse. "I will break you," he said, stepping forward. "And when you beg for mercy, I will burn this place to ashes." Adana only smirked. "Then come and try." The moment he took another step, the battle began. Arrows rained from the trees, striking Okai's men before they could react. Warriors of Zaraka leaped from the shadows, spears driving into the invaders. The warlord's army fought back, but they were caught in the traps Adana and Tund had set. Pits opened beneath their feet, spikes impaled them, and flaming logs rolled down the hills, crushing their ranks. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Adana and Tund charged. Adana and Okai met in the heart of the battlefield, their warriors locked in combat all around them. The warlord swung a massive axe, but Adana dodged, rolling beneath his strike and slashing at his leg with her spear. Blood spattered the ground, but Okai barely flinched. He swung again, and this time, his axe clipped her shoulder. Pain flared through her, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. Tund fought his way toward her, cutting down Okai's men as he moved, but the warlord's personal guards blocked his path. "Adana," he shouted, but she did not look back. This was her fight. Okai lunged, and Adana ducked under his strike, spinning and driving her spear into his side. He roared in pain, staggering back. "You are just a woman," he snarled. "And you," she said, twirling her spear, "are just a man who underestimated me." With a final, powerful thrust, she drove her spear through his chest. Okai gasped, dropping his axe. His massive body swayed for a moment before crashing to the ground. Silence fell over the battlefield. The warlord was dead. His remaining soldiers, seeing their leader fall, turned and fled into the jungle. The warriors of Zaraka let out a victorious roar. The village was safe. As the sun rose over Zaraka, the people gathered in the village square. Adana stood before them, her spear still stained with the blood of the warlord. Beside her stood Tund, his sword at his side. "We have proven," she said, "that Zaraka is not a village of the weak. We are warriors, men and women alike. Let no one ever try to claim us again." The villagers cheered, their voices echoing into the sky. Tund turned to Adana, pride in his eyes. "You have done what no one else could. You have changed the way the world sees strength." Adana smiled. "And I will continue to fight, always." And so, the legend of Adana, the warrior bride, spread across the land. Songs were sung of her battles, stories told of her victories. Men no longer came to claim her, they came to learn from her. She was no prize. She was a queen. A warrior. A legend. We have gotten to the end of this story. Kindly like and subscribe for more.